We have an update on the LaMelo Ball injury. We'll also get to some NBA trade deadline stuff, some fake trades. Bobby Marks coming up with a couple, and we'll discuss what that would mean for the Hornets going forward. That's all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. There's Doug Branson. Find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. He's also writing the Locked On Hornets newsletter. He's also hosting Locked On NBA. He's also texting you. He's a part of all of those things. Again, the mighty Doug Branson. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game Time.
Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we have some, I would say, pretty good news on the LaMelo Ball front. I was actually watching NBA Today yesterday, and Shams Charania, he comes on and says that there's some cautious optimism surrounding the LaMelo Ball injury. X-rays taken after the injury, they were negative on that left ankle sprain. He will undergo an MRI today at some point, Wednesday, for those that might be listening at a different date, January 29th. So we'll see if there's another update to come sooner rather than later, maybe right after we hop off of this pod, because that's what happens quite a bit, Doug. Maybe that's when it's going to happen. But we do know he is not going to play tonight against Brooklyn. We know there are a lot of players that aren't going to play tonight against Brooklyn, but everybody was looking at the LaMelo Ball injury. Cautious optimism, X-rays negative, undergoing an MRI today. We'll see what happens. But I think for the most part, given his injury history, given his ankle injury history, pretty good news.
Oh, yeah, it's certainly better than them finding out that it was a fracture or that it was a severe sprain and that we immediately got the news that he was going to be out for some longer period of time. But I think we're still in wait-and-see mode. If they're doing the MRI today and they're still going to be evaluating it, I think we're just not going to know until
Right.
they give us the 2-week evaluation period or whatever it ends up being. But I'll say the same thing that I said on yesterday's show, which is the priority should be getting LaMelo Ball to 100%. It's a bummer for fans that had tickets purchased for this long home stretch that they're on, that they're not going to get to see LaMelo Ball. But at this point, there is no reason to push him back onto the floor any sooner than he needs to.
Yeah, so we were out there for the military care event. Wes and Walker, we were hosting a show at the Spectrum Center. We interviewed Miles Bridges. We interviewed Mark Williams. We got to talk with Sam Farber. So we were in the building. We didn't see LaMelo there at the military care event, which makes sense, probably getting treatment on that ankle, just figuring out what the hell is going on, the severity of all of it. But Miles said he was feeling really good. I was trying to get something else, but he said, no, he's doing really well and he's in good spirits. And that's all we seem to be hearing about LaMelo. You go back to the locker room, good spirits, engaging with teammates. So it doesn't seem like the attitude would suggest that there is a really serious injury. But again, you're right. Who knows? We're not going to get any confirmation until we get an MRI and then we get the final update. What's frustrating, though, too, about all of this, Doug, is you see the Hornets injury report. Everybody's on it. There's not anybody playing. So just to reveal everybody not playing tonight against the Nets, it's LaMelo. Josh Green is going to be out with right foot soreness. Trey Mann still out. Cody Martin out with a sports hernia. Okay. Brandon Miller out, scaphounate. Grant Williams, ACL. Mark Williams, Mark Williams isn't going to play. The left foot injury management, he's also out. So when you sit LaMelo out, you could understand that. In fact, I would have, if I were forced to be putting money on an injury prop on FanDuel, I would say, yeah, LaMelo Ball is probably going to be out in this game. But we're also in this tank limbo where everybody's out. So if they were making a push for the playoffs or if they were playing competitive basketball and there wasn't any incentive to lose whatsoever, well, then maybe they would bring LaMelo back because he is 100% and they're not holding him out just like they're holding everybody out against a team that's also they also have incentive to lose, right? So this is what's tough is we don't really know when he could come back and how cautious the Hornets are being and how incentivized the Hornets are by holding him out as well. It all makes it a little bit harder to figure out what's going on with Melo.
Yeah, well, but that's going to be the situation when your team is not focused on this season. I mean, They're focused on getting better every day, all of the things that we hear from. And by the way, I haven't had a chance to listen to the full interview with Miles Bridges, but I did because I was very ill yesterday. I spent most of the day asleep. But yesterday I did catch your interview with Betsy Mack, who is in charge of the military care event and all of the charity and different stuff that the Hornets do in the community. And she said in the interview, 4 pillars. I was just like, I wonder if your body, just at the mention of 4 pillars, the old James Borrego staple, if it just like seized up a little bit.
It did seize up a little bit, but it was for a good cause. So, you hold your anger back. It's like, sorry, Betsy, it's not you, it's Borrego. You're doing a great thing here. Go on. I apologize. I didn't cringe because of anything you said.
Anyway, but the Hornets have entered a phase of realism. They've come to terms with what this season wasn't supposed to be exactly like this. This season was really supposed to be like, the question we were asking at the beginning of the season was, is this team going to be so good that the organization is forced to reevaluate and to move some guys that maybe will break the hearts of Hornets fans because they've got to salvage their ability to get a high lottery pick and use that pick either to actually select a player or package it in a deal. Well, that's not happening, right? I mean, their hands were not forced. This is the hand that they've been dealt for what feels like 5 or 6 seasons in a row now. But I'm glad they're getting realistic. I'm glad they're shifting gears. And now we get an opportunity to check in on the development of players that I think will be either important when it comes to this trade deadline. Guys like Josh Okogie. I don't know. Was Martin on the list? Was Martin on the out list?
He's sports hernia. Yeah, a hernia Cody Martin is dealing with. So
okay, well, it's going to be a big game for Josh Okogie, Musa Diabate. Guys that even if you want them to stay with the organization like Diabate, I don't think many people want to see him traded, but it's just going to be good experience for him as well. And KJ Simpson too, probably get a chance to see him.
I was going to say we should in the third segment just try to guess what the starting lineup's going to be and see who's most close to being right, because that would be, because it's going to be tough. I mean you can get close, but it's not a foregone conclusion on who's going to start. But anyways, point well received. It's a big opportunity for all these guys, especially I just keep looking at those wing defenders. I have to imagine one of them's on the move, whether it's Okogie, Cody Martin, somebody, and who wins out. It would be funny to see you're so good you actually get the most value in return, so now you're still out anyway. But the wing defenders are the guys that I'm watching the most. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Bees everywhere! Trade deadline. Bobby Marks has a couple of Hornets trades that he proposes, and they're actually pretty interesting. So we'll talk about those on the other side of the break. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game Time?
Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you in their Zone Deals application. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More Locked On Hornets coming up. trade deadline talk. Bobby Marks coming up with a couple of trades here, Doug. Before we get to some of those proposed trades from our sweet baby Bobby, did you have anything that you were looking for the Hornets to address going into the trade deadline, or did you see anything a little more interesting that you wanted to get to first before we get to the Khris Middleton of it all, just to give you a little teaser?
Oh, boy. Let's dig into the Sicko Satchel because I think it will kind of weave itself into this conversation around these deals. So Anita of the 24th Plumlee Division asks, what would you consider a successful trade deadline for the Charlotte Hornets? And on the flip side, what would frustrate you trying to mentally prepare for how to feel given the range of what the front office could do or could not do? So what's your, sort of best case scenario? What's a successful trade deadline? What's one that would frustrate you, Walker?
Oh, man. So a successful trade deadline, I think there are many versions of that. I think the successful trade deadline would be, one, clearly to get as much value as you possibly can. So if you're looking at this from an asset collection standpoint, which the Hornets are going to be looking at it from that point of view, is there any way you can get a first from somebody? I wonder if you could just get some kind of, it would be, I would imagine, heavily protected, given what is going to be offered out there on the trade market. The only way that you get the lighter protection would be to deal a Miles Bridges. And I don't know, we were 50-50 on that. I think those numbers start to come down, Doug, as they suffer a lot more injuries, as Miles continues to play hard in the second half, regardless of the situation. It doesn't matter. I think those numbers actually come down from Miles being traded. So if that's the case, is there any way you can somehow get a protected first? I think that'd be pretty tough. Overall, second round picks, they're still going to stockpile those. Maybe like a really enticing the young reclamation project where it's just not working out with another team. Like, is there somebody that's very early in their career, but there's a team that just can't afford to be as patient with said player, and the Hornets come in as that third, fourth team. There's some money meandering that all these teams have to roll through, and then the Hornets just end up with what is a pretty promising young player that just hasn't had enough time with these other franchises because they can't afford to be patient. So I think those are a couple of ways I would deem the Hornets successful going into the trade deadline. We can start there with you, too. How would you deem them successful?
Yeah, I think you hit on all of the things, and it goes into Bobby Marks' article here where he puts the Hornets in the tier 4 of trade deadline participators, and he deems that tier the middlemen. So that's, I think, the most successful trade deadline scenario for the Hornets is that they are able to facilitate deals or facilitate teams getting under certain aprons, and they come away with assets that they can use in this next offseason to really upgrade this roster, because I just don't think that they currently have the players that are valuable enough, and it's just not the right time to make those moves at this trade deadline. I think this is going to be a really sticky trade deadline. I don't know that there are going to be any major moves that the Hornets could come away with, like big-time players at this trade deadline. Those players have all made their intentions really clear as to where they want to play, where they want their futures to be. I think there are going to be many more opportunities in this upcoming offseason. So that's what I would look at. In terms of what would frustrate me, I mean, obviously doing nothing. This team needs to continue to do something and build assets and get ready to make their moves. So if they come away and they're not a middleman and they just do nothing, or they can't get the deal done, which is what we've seen in years past, pre-Jeff Peterson, I'm pretty confident that he's going to get something done. Already got something done. I mean, he traded Nick Richards and got Josh Okogie, but can he turn Josh Okogie into something more? Like Bobby Marks has him moving Josh Okogie to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Isaac Okoro and 2 second-round picks. Like, as much as I love Okogie, to me, that's great because you get more size than Okogie on the wing, and Isaac Okoro pre-injury was shooting the basketball pretty well, and you get 2 second-round picks. Like, I love that deal. So can he do something like that? Can he continue to parlay and build assets? That's what I want to see. It would frustrate me if they do nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would like to see something happen. And Bobby Marks, he's got some of these teams in categories. He actually talks about every team in the NBA, what to watch for at the trade deadline, and they're in different tiers. The deal makers, the Hornets are in tier 4, which is the middlemen. I don't know how that is defined. It does not tell me how that is defined, but they are the lead team in tier 4, the middlemen. But if you look at a couple of the trades that Bobby Marks creates, you talked about Isaac Okoro, 2 second-round picks coming to Charlotte in exchange for Josh Okogie. That would make sense to me, too. I'd probably pull the trigger on that one. The interesting one is he says Charlotte could receive Khris Middleton and a 2031 top 5 protected first round pick. 2031 top 5 protected first round pick in exchange for Miles Bridges. And this is what he writes. Trading Bridges for a 2031 first rounder continues Charlotte's trend of obtaining future draft capital. Middleton's $34 million salary next season adds $9 million to the Hornets payroll, with $27 million in non-guaranteed contracts. Okogie, Cody Martin, Vasa Micic. Charlotte is well below the luxury tax. And again, those guys could be also out the door. You'd have to match money. We'll see. But again, Miles goes out in exchange for Khris Middleton, a big contract, and a 2031 top 5 protected first round pick. Wow, that would be a big time deal. What do you think?
So, yeah, you would be taking on Khris Middleton's bad money contract from the perspective, although Khris Middleton is playing a little bit better since coming back from, I think he had surgery on both ankles. And that's like, he'd be the perfect fit in Charlotte. Like he would have a lot to talk about with so many of the players here having ankle injuries. But look, I mean, yeah, long term, is Khris Middleton going to be a star player, an all-star again? I'm not really certain of that. I think most people aren't certain of that. Milwaukee is ready to deal. I think they want to do something at the deadline. Could it be something major like Jimmy Butler? I think that's still a possibility. So this Miles Bridges thing I would put in the class of like the backup move, which is where Miles Bridges I think has comfortably sat since he came up in Charlotte Hornets trade rumors, is like he's going to be the plan B or the plan C for a team that was unable to cash in on what they wanted to and still needed to make a move. So, I mean, I think this is, of the deals that I've seen, it's kind of a realistic deal, although I would love to see that 2031. I don't think it's ever going to be unprotected, but man, if they could do what they did in that last trade deadline pre-Jeff Peterson, where they got it to like top 2 protected, because by 2031, Giannis could be out of there. I think his free agency comes up in 26, and everyone's trying to position themselves for the 26 free agency palooza. So, by 2031, Milwaukee could just be a crater. And then you've got an opportunity to get a 3 or 4 pick if that's how the chips fall. And it goes right in line with another question from the Sicko Satchel, which is from Yo-Yo, who says, in hindsight, dumping Terry and Gordon were great moves. I don't see anything like that coming. Man. Do you? Bridges, ? And the answer to that is they kind of already made their pivot. Like last season's trade deadline was the pivot. Yeah. You're not going to see them pivot any further. Like Brandon Miller's not going anywhere. LaMelo's not going anywhere. Mark Williams is not going anywhere. So unless someone pushes him out of the paint. But
hey, this is your time. That AD game, this is your time, baby. You swing for the fences because you're hitting home runs.
So they're not going to make another major pivot. This is about what can you get around the margins to really complete your asset profile to get ready to approach this offseason and find out if there are any opportunities to go after players who may be disgruntled or not happy with their situation. I mean, De'Aaron Fox, I think it's like a long shot, because I think he wants to go to San Antonio or Miami or Houston or something. But those are the kind of opportunities that could be available to you in the offseason, but you've got to have the first round picks to do it.
Well, maybe we touch on that De'Aaron Fox thing on the next segment, but I do want to finish up this Bucks stuff before we move on. Bucks stuff, by the way. Bucks stuff. Just to clarify that, make that very clear to everyone. If you look at the Bucks payroll, Giannis, he's 30 years old, and he's on the books after this season for 3 more years. He's off of the books his last year. It's player option 2027, 2028. So just to put that in perspective, you're talking 28-29, 29-30, 30-31. It's 3 more years, Doug, after his first contract or this contract is done, and he's already 30. So the 2031 first round pick, it could be absolutely lovely for this team, especially if you just go ahead and take the bet that the Bucks are going to do everything they can to milk every ounce of talent out of 36-year-old Giannis, unless, of course, they trade him. But you're also hoping in that scenario that if Giannis is traded, then the value isn't 4 first-round picks and all the pick swaps at that point. Maybe you're trading for Giannis for I don't know, something less than that, because he's not showing you that he's still the real Giannis, and that's a game that might age poorly. You know, I would love the 2031 top 5 protected pick. And then Khris Middleton, he's only on the books for one more year after this. So you're out taking his contract on now, and then he's making $34 million on a player option next season. And then after that, done. Last thing, like Miles Bridges, Khris Middleton, Miles is an attacker. He gets into the paint, and you need that. That is a skill set that the Hornets almost desperately need, given what their players are. Rebounding, defense, he gives you all of that. But Khris Middleton would give you some shooting. He has the one bad year here recently, but he's still shooting at a pretty nice clip from 3. So if you can just get Khris Middleton somehow to stay healthy for just a little while longer, and all he's got to do is just be a catch and shoot guy, I wonder how that would work with Brandon Miller, who's been like the low end comp of Brandon Miller, of Brandon Miller and Khris Middleton. If those two guys work together, I don't know. That'd be interesting. But yeah, that top 31, top 5 pick would be the big thing coming back in return. All right. Do you have anything else to finish before we go to the third segment?
No, I think you covered it all. I mean, okay. I think there is a little bit of upside and not upside necessarily, but a little bit of hope that if you acquire Khris Middleton, that could mean something to your team. But I think you'd have to be realistic about where he is as a player, where his body is. But I like what you said there. I think the contrast is that you do add a little bit of shooting. I mean, against Utah, he was 10 of 13 from the field, but he's not shooting a ton of threes right now. But he is really kind of getting back into the swing of things. It would just give you better shooting overall, which is something the Hornets have desperately needed this season, even more than an attacker.
All right, let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
We'll give you some finishing thoughts on the trade deadline, and then maybe talk a little bit about the Hornets and the Nets and try to figure out what the starting lineup is going to look like. That's all still to come here on LOH. Steer the ship, Doug Branson. Where do you want to take us? Do you want to go a little bit more into this De'Aaron Fox stuff? Because I think we could make that local. I don't know. How are you feeling about the De'Aaron Fox trade demand out in Sacramento?
Yeah, I mean, look, if Sacramento did find a deal that they like at the trade deadline, I think it's really unlikely. I think this thing, and if it did happen, I could see it, involving, it seems like I think there are going to be like 2 or 3 teams that get together and say, all right, we all have problems. Let's solve them. Miami's got a Jimmy Butler problem. Minnesota's got a Julius Randle problem. A lot of teams got problems that they want to fix at the trade deadline. And so I really feel like the De'Aaron Fox thing, but maybe there needs to be a 4th or 5th team involved. That could be the local angle. I don't think the local angle is the Hornets have any shot in hell of acquiring De'Aaron Fox. And we've seen teams like Toronto do this with Kawhi, where you bring a guy in, he's not going to re-sign, but you go for one thing. The Hornets are not in that position. They don't have the structure like that. That's just not a thing that makes any sense for them right now. Maybe it will make sense in the offseason when they have a bit of a plan together about like who they are and what they're going to do. All right, now maybe we can go out and get a guy. If De'Aaron Fox is still available then, maybe that makes sense. I think what makes more sense at the trade deadline for the Hornets now would be to go after young players, young wings. We mentioned Okoro. I think that's what scares me about the Middleton thing, because Middleton's not a young wing, but you get the first-round pick. That would be the exception there. But another guy that I like is Max Christie out of L.A., and Josh Okogie and Miles Bridges put on a show against L.A., a little tryout, similar to what Nick Richards did against Phoenix. So if the Lakers are salivating for a wing defender or a wing attacker, then maybe you ship one of those guys, bring back Max Christie, who I think has shot the ball well and plays defense, 3-and-D wing, gives you a little bit more size in terms of height, which we talked about in the last show. The Hornets are height deficient. Christie, I think, is like 6'6", maybe 6'7" on a good day on his tippy toes. I like that deal.
Max Christie reminds me of one of my favorite things about our podlationship, in that when we go through draft talk, you have in your brain who Walker's guys are from like pick
you love Max Christie
on down. Well, that's what you do, right? Because I did like Max Christie, but it's like, hey, that's your guy, which I do love. I welcome that. It's Bryce Sensabaugh. Hey, that's your guy, right? Like I got the, and you remember that, and you'll text me during these games. Hey, your guy, that was your guy, right? It's just Max Christie is on that list, and I think it really stems from one of the workout interviews. I was on the call when he was interviewing with media after like a draft workout. But anyways, Max Christie would be really interesting to me. The De'Aaron Fox stuff, just real quickly. So does it make sense for Charlotte? No, not really. I love the idea of just having two ball handlers that can shoot and attack and complement one another. Like, I think it would be really fun to have De'Aaron Fox and LaMelo Ball on the same team. That would be a lot of fun for me to watch. But clearly, the Hornets aren't in the right spot. They're not going to go after De'Aaron. You risk frustrating LaMelo, taking the ball out of his hands, because De'Aaron is not a catch and shoot guy. Like, he's somebody that's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. So you wouldn't risk it. To put it simply, no, they're not going to trade for De'Aaron. What I am interested about this, though, is I think De'Aaron Fox, whatever he's traded for, Doug, the price with what De'Aaron is going to go for, I think we're going to be able to similarly compare that to LaMelo, especially if you consider how the media thinks what the media thinks about De'Aaron. You look at some of the All-Star votes, like LaMelo, they're just kind of similar in the sense of the fans overwhelmingly voted for LaMelo. The fans did not overwhelmingly vote for De'Aaron Fox. But I do feel like younger-ish point guard, even though he's a few years older than LaMelo. I do think I think there's like a comparison in price. At least there's a starting point. So if De'Aaron Fox gets traded for something, then what does that mean for LaMelo potential? I don't know. You're not buying it?
Not really, because I think the big differences that would separate those two deals would be LaMelo's extensive injury history and his lack of history in the playoffs or any kind of winning record outside of the play-in disaster that he was a part of. So that's where I think that's what separates that's what's going to make De'Aaron Fox more attractive, and particularly the Spurs, who want to pair a guard with Victor Wembanyama that they're confident is not going to take over is not going to consume the offense. I mean, again, fair or unfair, I think the word on LaMelo is that he consumes your offense. He becomes your offense, and that's not going to be as attractive to a team that has a big or a forward that they want to pair a guard with. It's going to be more attractive to a team that has nothing and wants something. That could be LaMelo then could garner 3-4 first round picks, but it's going to be 4 first and a good player or a couple of good young players. I think, like for the San Antonio thing, they're going to have to give up Castle. They're going to have to give up another player, maybe Keldon Johnson, plus 4 first round picks. Like, LaMelo's not getting anywhere near. If De'Aaron Fox didn't exist and San Antonio was interested in pairing a guard and they came to the Charlotte Hornets about LaMelo, I'm not sure that it would be 4 first rounds, Stephon Castle, and Keldon Johnson.
It's so funny, man, because I think LaMelo would, I don't know, I think LaMelo would be a better fit with Wemby. Like, I would be getting rid of all that stuff to pair LaMelo and Wemby. And that was very unclear. That was not organized or concise from my takes. I think what my point is wherever De'Aaron Fox goes, that's going to be a high-level NBA point guard on the move. So I think we can start there with trying to assess what the value for LaMelo would be. There is an age gap. De'Aaron is a couple of years older, but I think there's some offsetting factors between the two, even considering their big differences. So on one hand, De'Aaron Fox has been healthier than LaMelo, but also you could point to LaMelo being a significantly better three-point shooter. De'Aaron has had one good year from the three-point line. Outside of that, it's been pretty terrible his entire career. I guess his second season, he shot 37%. He shot 37% last year. Other than that, it's been 32 or below for De'Aaron Fox, which isn't very good. You are talking about differences in attacking the rim between the two. De'Aaron is better at that, finishing better inside the three-point arc, and so that would be a point towards De'Aaron. But also De'Aaron is 6'3", LaMelo is 6'7", and can make every pass, and LaMelo is clearly a better facilitator. So it's different taste. They're different flavor point guards, but I think with some of the offsetting factors, like you still probably get to something similar in value, in my opinion. You're right. The injuries, that would be the most worrisome, and I don't know if teams would be willing to take that risk. So maybe that's what would hinder teams from giving up the De'Aaron Fox type value in this case. I do think it's an interesting starting point, though, right? Like, we've tried to figure out what would LaMelo go for. What was the last point guard on the move? Like, I'm trying to think of somebody that was in his prime, like relatively young, going
somewhere to Houston.
Yeah, and Van Vliet, I mean, that was a free agent destination, and and people thought
that wasn't a trade, yeah.
Yeah, and people thought Houston way overpaid for FVV. Like, this is interesting to me, man. Like, you're talking a big time point guard on the move here, so will just be interesting to see what he goes for on the trade market.
Was it Brad Beal? was the Beal deal to? From Washington,
yeah, and that was reluctant, and also again, not a point guard, but that's that's what I was trying to think of. Like, who's the last big point guard to be on the move for a significant return? The teams just aren't giving up on those guys because they're really valuable. You don't have one. It sucks to run an offense without one of those guys. So
hey, we know. We are
You're damn right.
Intimately aware of the fact that when the Hornets don't have LaMelo Ball, and you're going to be very aware of it tonight against the Brooklyn Nets, it is very difficult to score a lot of points. You can run an offense, and sometimes, and people have noticed this, like sometimes without LaMelo, for a game or two, the offense looks to be a little snappier. The ball moves a little bit better because LaMelo consumes a lot of oxygen in the offense, and he also pulls the defense in certain directions, and he takes a lot of shots. And so when he's out, the ball might move a little bit better, but the shots aren't necessarily going to be better. And so, and then after a while, again, things tend to gum up again. So yeah, I would caution the Hornets on making any kind of panic move to get rid of LaMelo Ball because, I don't think the value of it right now. I think they've got to see LaMelo in a postseason situation before that conversation is even entertained.
Oh, yeah. Let me put this disclaimer on it, right? I'm talking about not wanting to trade LaMelo.
No, put it on the scroll. Walker Mail
God, here's the
wants
bottom
to trade
line.
LaMelo Ball.
I'm talking about just the kind of value, right? Because we have not seen it for a point guard in this tier, in this ilk, an all-NBA, all-star type point guard that is younger, 27 or younger on the move. And so it would be interesting to see just how LaMelo would be valued. By the way, like, you're talking about the gravity, LaMelo would spread that defense out way more than De'Aaron. Wemby and LaMelo would be phenomenal. I just wish it was in a Hornets uniform. I wouldn't want to see that in a Spurs uniform. No, you can't have them. We want them here because of what LaMelo can do for a team. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. There's Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Text him. You can find his information there on everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also listen to Locked On NBA along with Hayes and Matt Moore. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. We'll be back with you tomorrow to recap Charlotte and Brooklyn. Have a great rest of your day.